iCommunity shines a light on the wide array of community news, arts and culture, and prolific charity efforts within the Asian diaspora networks. It's where the global Indian impact on the ground is celebrated. Log on at iglobalnews.com. Hello and a very warm welcome to today's session of the Living Bridge Conversations, the live series brought to you by iGlobal, your multimedia hub for and about global Indians. Thank you for joining us. I'm Tony Patty, your host for today, and I'm joined by Sanjay Rughani, a senior consultant, and alongside Jaysha Rughani, a founder at Sterling Professional Finance in London. Sanjay's experience through his finance intermediary and strategic consultant roles has led him to assist businesses of varying sizes, from corporate to SMEs. Now, this includes businesses and the overview and growth strategy development for them within all sectors, including healthcare, property finance, bridging development funds, peer-to-peer funding, crowdfunding, asset finance, invoice discounting and factoring, and general bank finance too. So amongst all these things, the many hats that he wears, he also travels the world as well on advising businesses on what they do, which is about to do in a few days' time. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it in just a few moments' time. Sanjay, once again, a great big hello and a very warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us here today.
Tony, an absolute pleasure to join you this afternoon on the iGlobal Living Bridge Conversation, and thank you for the invitation to have a conversation with you.
Fantastic. Now, a quick word for our viewers before we kick off. This show is yours too. We'd love you to participate. So do drop us your comments and questions, and we'll pick them up in the course of our conversation as we go along. Sanjay, with the introduction that I've just given, probably doesn't do justice to the great things that you do and have been doing for a very long time now. But I'd like to just to introduce our listeners and viewers to our first question today. Let's start by talking about the property bridge between London and India, which is a really hot subject right now. And would one say that it's fair to say that high net worth Indians are keen on London as a base? Because the property market has been quite buoyant in recent, over the past year. It's been up and down, but foreign investment hasn't ceased or hasn't stopped, has it? So where are we with this right now?
You're absolutely right in saying what you've just said there, Tony. The property market in London is buoyant, particularly with the high net worth individuals from India. I was listening to a webinar earlier this year with Barclays Bank International, where 46% of those interviewed suggested they would want to invest in London. Yeah. But the interesting point was, if I may, the rest of the figures suggested 41% was Dubai, Singapore was 4%, New York, surprisingly, 0%, and amongst others, 9% everywhere else in the world. So London certainly is an attractive place for Indians to come and invest in property. We at Sterling seem to do quite a bit of that at the moment, and we've seen quite a rise in that sector.
How amazing that New York falls right at the bottom of the list at 0, when it was once assumed to be the land of opportunity, where, for example, New York never sleeps, and it's where one could go and really make a living. And I won't say millions, but I'll say a living. And here we are with London at the top of the list. What a strange contrast that is.
Well, it is. You're absolutely right. New York was a very surprising 0 on that particular outcome. But I think London as a whole is very attractive from an education perspective. I think we have the diaspora already settled here, and it's comforting. But more importantly, I think you've also got to take into account the travel from India to London is shorter than going from India, London to New York. So it's almost half of the time. So that perhaps has some bearing on it as well.
That's an interesting way of looking at it, I must admit. So with London being the attraction of the property market, and you mentioned the Indian diaspora, London, UK, perhaps even a property market, in your view, What is the attraction? Because you mentioned education a little while ago, and I know that certain strategies have been introduced by the present government whereby they're encouraging foreign study students to come here to either further or complete their studies and get their degrees and what have you. That's one attraction. And the housing market as a whole has been quite an interesting one. It's been up and down and all over the place. And we've got interest rate rises on the horizon coming up very soon as well. Where do we stand on that?
So a number of reasons, really. You've mentioned a couple of them there,
Yes.
but the main factor again, we have the connectivity between India and the UK from the days of Raj. So people are comfortable. The language barriers are not there. Yes, one can argue the same for New York. However, there's culturally coming together of the two countries from days of old. There's also the security in the UK in terms of, I'm secure investing in the UK, both from a political and a geographical position. The diaspora have settled in very well here. I mean, look at the number of temples that have come to fruition over the last probably decade, if not more. Culturally, we're becoming more and more in vogue in regards to people accepting things like Diwali. I mean, you just got to take Diwali in the square that you've been part of for
Yeah.
many years,
Yeah.
and what a transformation that's become. You've got the Mayor of London actually seeking to make London more of a global, cultural, diversified place of living. So there's a whole host of aspects. You've also got culturally from places of shopping, restaurants. You've got huge number of Indian restaurants, and you just go take, the Indian food market, which has actually grown and taken over any other
Yes.
cuisine from the world into London. So the opportunity here to invest in what is a geopolitically stable country is obviously quite attractive to high net worths, or any Indian for that matter, from anywhere.
Sanjay, you talk about exponential growth in many different factors, and the Indian food market is one that you mentioned. Indian food shops as well, definitely on the rise. As far as your business is concerned, Sterling Professional Finance here in London, where do we stand at the moment? What sort of changes have you seen in business and the market trends from where you stand at Sterling as a company?
Well, look, I think there has been a setback due to COVID
Yeah.
over the last 18 months. People are just coming back. We've just seen parts of Europe go back into lockdown over the
Mm.
weekend. But I think here in the UK, we're probably going to miss it. I suspect there will be some small kind of aspects coming in. How will that affect businesses? Well, certainly if you go into the high streets, I was out at the weekend, one of the shopping centres in London. It was quiet. Seems to go on online. However, you talked about restaurants earlier on. I've been to several over the last few weeks, and the reality is it's actually quite buoyant out there. Yeah, there's a
Interesting.
lot that's going on. There's much to be said about the Indian, or the restaurants as general, whether it's central London or the suburbs. You've had new restaurants even opening up. You've seen Atul Koch's new one in Wembley. We've seen Chin Chin in Pinner, a Pan-Asian restaurant that's open, and several others I could name here and carry on. But the reality is there's clearly a demand for people wanting to go out now.
Going off the beaten track, do you think we're heading for another lockdown?
I don't think we are. I think there may be aspects of that comes into play, which may be a little bit more tiresome for us. But I think we've probably seen the worst of it. However, nobody can determine it's a no.
Indeed. Let's talk about investment in properties, particularly London properties here, Sanjay, because it's something that you've been at the forefront of for many, many years.
Indeed.
In terms of financial or other barriers that Indians face, what are the barriers that they do face, and what must they bear in mind when looking to invest in London properties?
First and foremost, I would always say, do your due diligence. Check the
Yeah.
areas out. Check out where you want to be in London. There are parts of London. I met a client recently who was sort of looking to buy something in literally south of London, and suddenly his kids are there renting at the moment. and felt it was a little bit too far out. So where do they really want to be? They want to be between Westminster and Baker Street in this instance, because it's close for them to travel to work. It's central London. It's a little bit hip. It's easy access to restaurants and other places, and of course being able to get across to parts of London. Do your due diligence is the first thing I would always say. In terms of investment barriers, there aren't any real barriers per se, other than look at the immigration status, whether you are able to invest here, and again, take professional advice on that point. The amount of investment that you are going to invest is also quite important. Can it be spread? Can you get 2 properties, perhaps one to start off with, and then build on that? There's also the annual cap of how much a Indian high net worth or any particular Indian can bring across in the UK for investment purposes. Again, they should always take advice on that. And this is something that they should, in fairness, check with their advisors in the UK as well as locally in India.
But what you are saying, it's not impossible to do. It's still very much a feasible and attractive scenario to be in when it comes to investing in a London property for foreign investors. Is that what you're saying to us? It's still a lucrative market?
Absolutely.
Right.
If I give you examples in the last 6 months, without any presence in India for us, we've done probably 6 to 7 transactions for national Indians here in the UK, and we've got some in the pipeline that we're still doing and looking at. Not necessarily the quickest, but we get them done. Yes, there are some that we've actually turned and said, look, sorry, it can't be done for you for whatever reasons there in the background. However, achievability in terms of funding, yes. Loan to values, perhaps a little bit tighter than what they may seek.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you are able to achieve, providing you've got the essence to want to do it and the background investment amounts around you.
We are talking with Sanjay Rughani, and Sanjay Rughani runs an organization called Sterling Professional Finance in our Living Bridge conversations right here, compliments of iGlobal. We'll take a short break and we'll be back right after this.
Thanks, Tony.
iGlobal Radio is the brand new hub of podcasts for and about global Indians. News, views, interviews, wellness, money matters, and much, much more. Tune in to iGlobal Radio at iglobalnews.com.
So once again, a huge thank you for joining us here today with our Living Bridge conversations. And as viewers and listeners, you are very welcome. And we talk with Sanjay Rughani today. Now, a little bit about these Living Bridge conversations, and they've been curated by iGlobal to bring you many such discussions and deliberations. And they will include many such insightful discussions on finance, but also cover subjects as varied as yoga and wellness, music, literature, foodie recipes, and much, much more. So as we talk with Sanjay and he shares his insights with us today, would love you to stay tuned to the iGlobal social media channels for updates on our regular streams with an array of guests that embody the British Indian diaspora living bridge. And of course, you, our viewers and listeners, are at the heart of our conversations. So do join in with your questions in the comments box to be picked up as we go along. So back to our discussion then, Sanjay. You are Sanjay Rughani of Sterling Professional Finance joining us today. We thank you for that. Now, Sanjay, there's a lot of buzz. You're welcome. There's a lot of buzz around the UK-India partnership with talk of trade deals. How do you see this landscape unfolding in the coming months? Because it's all good news the way I'm seeing it right now.
Well, absolutely. I think, look, we've all had the pandemic worldwide. The world needs to trade. We've had Brexit, and therefore you've just got to take into account what happened in April with the Prime Minister Boris Johnson wanting to go across to India. Sadly, that trip didn't take place due to the rising number of COVID and the Delta variants there. But the fact is, UK needs India as much as India needs UK and the rest of the world to trade, particularly after Brexit. So there's no question in our minds, as I said earlier on, there's this sort of coming together of the two countries that were around as part of the one group previously. So there's familiarity there, that there is language there, that there is a legal stability of processes and what have you.
Yes.
But if you take demand for both countries to trade, yes, of course, the two countries will meet and discuss how they're going to allow trade to be bilateral between the two countries.
There is one thing, of course, that Prime Minister Modi announced the formal creation of the UK-India Tech Partnership, and the partnership was aimed to bring together the best minds working in tech to unlock the future potential and deliver high-skilled jobs and economic growth for both countries. So the key aim was to create a catalyst, innovation, and also technology scenarios which address India's current socio-economic priorities. In the long run, it looks pretty good because if we bring together technical clusters, future mobilities, and also artificial intelligence. Here's a word that you and I love. Data sciences. As far as the UK India technical hub is concerned, as far as you're concerned at Sterling Finance, where do we stand on this?
Well, look, Tony, technology. India's been at the forefront of that for years, right?
Yes.
You've just got to take who the CEOs are of companies such as Google, such as Hotmail.
Hey.
Hotmail was invented by an Indian. Let's face it, the first ever free email platform to go global. Yeah. You've got to take, even if you take NASA, look at the top echelons of NASA's brains. It's Indians. Yeah. And if you take one stage further, forget the technology aspect. Look at Joe Biden's, advisors. Most of those have now come from an Indian background.
Yes.
The reality is, technology in India have always been at the forefront. They will always remain at the forefront. I think there's going to be a huge amount of investment there, both from India in particular, but also from the UK in bringing a lot of this across. So why not? I think we can only grow with technology, and COVID has actually proved that people are now working on a hybrid basis. They're working cross borders from here, India, and anywhere else in the world through things like Zoom, and even what we're doing here today, for instance.
Yeah.
This is what technology is about, and that investment, that announcement by Prime Minister Modi, will only be echoed by the rest of the world, I suspect, going forward. So watch that space, in my view.
Well, indeed. I think there are exciting times ahead, as you quite rightly say, Sanjay. Brexit has almost paled into insignificance right now. COVID has disrupted investment in the UK in many ways, which you mentioned earlier. Businesses have suffered and still suffering. Some of them have emerged as survivors, some of them perhaps not, sadly. What kind of impact has this had on Indian businesses investing in the UK, everything from Brexit to COVID, Sanjay?
So look, first of all, any situation such as COVID or Brexit, whilst may have a detrimental effect for many, has an opportunity for many equally. If we take the detriment of both Brexit and COVID, I believe, and particularly from an Indian perspective into the UK, there hasn't been a huge impact on that. In fact, actually, if you look at the Grant Thornton report, the 8th report they produced between India and the UK, which was done in conjunction, collaboration with the Confederation of Indian Industry, CII, it indicated the number of companies operating in the UK went up from 842 in 2020 to 850 in 2021, i.e. this year. So over 12 months, you've actually had 8 new companies come into the UK. That's a fair number, I would say, and these are not insizable type of firms, frankly. And dare I say, there'll be other small ones that won't take into account. There's other investors in the UK that have come in. But if you just take the larger organisations, you take, for instance, the Ambani family, who've just bought Stoke Poges, close to you actually, the golf club. What will they do with that? Will they create it as a private home, or will they create it as a very exclusive, high-end sort of mini golf resort?
Well, I hope
Because
so,
only,
and I hope they'll give me a membership of that free of charge.
I'm sure. Well, if you get that, make sure you get me in there as well,
Oh,
Tony. But there
absolutely,
we
yeah.
go.
Yes,
but,
friends
but
and spas, absolutely, yes.
yeah, but you've just got to look at those numbers, and I
Yeah.
think the impact of COVID and the pandemic has actually gone the other way. I think high net worth business owners in India are looking for areas to expand their businesses into, and why not London and the UK?
Well, do you know, Sanjay, 850 Indian companies in the UK with combined revenues of 50.8 billion pounds together. These companies employed 116,000 plus people and paid 459.2 million pounds in corporation tax. Now, that's quite significant as far as the UK economy is concerned,
Absolutely.
because, as you quite rightly say, despite Brexit and COVID-19, Indian investment in the UK economy is actually growing.
Totally. Look, I mean, that's a phenomenal figures you've just announced there. The reality is, we don't even take into account the other smaller businesses. Look at the Indian diaspora that's come from East Africa, for instance,
Yes.
who originated from India. Look at the small businesses that are being created and what they contribute to Rishi Sunak's purses is amazing. Let's face it. We've created employment. We've created partnership in the communities. We've created additional sort of training and courses for individuals. And that's not just within the Asian community, that's widespread. So, absolutely, you're right.
Isn't it also incredible as we look at regional breakdowns? London has 53% of India invested companies, not just India, but you mentioned other continents as well. And the great thing about this is that here's something I'm going to throw at you, and a feather in my cap, or turban, as it were. Women directors. Of the 53% that I mentioned, of the 49 fastest growing Indian companies have a woman director. Now, this is something which is very much an Indian initiative. How incredible is that?
Well, absolutely. Look, at the end of the day, we just got to, let's talk about the ladies in our community and the wider community. They juggle jobs. They're not just, leaders in business. They're leaders in family life. They're leaders in community. They look after children. They look after our in-laws, or their in-laws rather than their parents. So the reality is they have skills that are probably beyond you and me at times. Let's face it. We just don't appreciate it, right? You just got to take your good lady into. Come on, at the end of the day, Tony, we may sort of giggle about it a little bit. However, I think it is an understated level of skill set. I know certainly, if I look at Jay and the number of things that she does, which you're aware of, and she's also
Yes,
part
indeed,
of
yeah.
iGlobal, it amazes me that we do have such level of talent, skill, and time efficiency to be able to achieve that. Yet it's only now it's coming to the fore.
Patience and energy is something that is a combination that comes to my mind as well, but that's another discussion for another day. As far as the future is concerned, it holds enormous opportunities for both countries, India and the UK, and other countries and continents, to cooperatively drive sustainable economic recovery after the pandemic. And I'm going to drift towards COP26 just very briefly in our conversation, because it's come to my mind, and I'm wearing my clever turban today. Where do we stand with that? Because India seems very committed towards growth and economic recovery for all continents.
Look, yes, absolutely. Why wouldn't you be? Somebody like Prime Minister Modi has to go out to the world and sell India. Unfortunately, that's what he's done in the last number of years that he's been a prime minister, and as a result of it, India has been sort of coveted with growth and what have you. But we all have to look at the environment. The pollution that was coming out of India back in the day. I remember going to India in the early 2000, mid 2000, and you couldn't breathe almost outside for the sake of fuel and gas that was emitted from the tuk-tuks and the vehicles out there. Today I go and it's a lot better. However, I still think there's a way to go. I think COP26 it is a good initiative, and it needs to be worked on and be pushed along in a slightly more fervent way to allow it to take place. And that's the key thing. That's the important aspect of it.
Sanjay, we talk about the India-UK, UK-India correlation and with other states as well. What more can be done, do you think, by us living in this country of Indian origin and vice versa? Because this partnership, let's face it, in our discussion today, one thing that we have established in a very primary way is that it's a very lucrative situation to be in financially, morally, and ethically as well. How can we contribute to that, and how can we gain something from that as far as the public is concerned and people living in this country who've traveled from distant and far lands to live in this country? How can we benefit from all this?
Well, first and foremost, Tony, we've got to look at ourselves today and say we are already contributing quite considerably to the economy, to the community partnerships, to cultural events, to even the food. Look at the food that's been brought into the country. And as I said earlier on, the curry is actually taking a whole new meaning in the UK. So
Yes.
the contribution we as Indians have made, whether we're second generation from East Africa or the first generation from India, is phenomenal. In answer to your question, how can we improve? There's loads of ways. I think we need to better angle the Indian name at the moment, because there's still I can't go to India and invest because there's still a bit of corruption there, for instance. I think that is going away, albeit not as quickly as perhaps one could wish for, but it's certainly going away. And we need to look at India. We need to invite Indians here into the UK, both ways, in a positive manner. I think for we spoke about COVID and we spoke about the Brexit. Yeah, there are negatives to both sides, but there are also upsides and positives to both sides.
Right.
And I think we need to look at the upsides and say, well, okay, how does that work? And where the negatives are, work towards eliminating that. And that's really my view.
Yeah, well said. Your words of advice, finally, then, Sanjay, for global Indians investing in the UK. What would you say to those people? And take your time, because this is going to be a learning process for me as well to hear about this from you, an expert that you are.
Thanks for that, Tony. Look, Tony, it's very simple. Yeah. As I said earlier on, it's always important, whatever you're doing, whether you're investing in the UK or anywhere in the world, to get good advice, do your due diligence. It's important to have good advisors, get to know those places. And yes, there may be a cost attached to this, but that's a short-term cost for a long-term gain, in my view. Ensure that you connect with the right lawyers, the right accountants, the right advisors such as us at Sterling, for instance. And there's a simple scenario to this, because ultimately I've seen where somebody's come to us and suggests, I'm buying this property here and I'm going to go with lawyer X who is up the road. He's done one for £650 plus VAT. That's all very well for somebody local, but somebody who's coming from abroad, whether it's India or anywhere else, there are a lot more aspects to consider. Therefore, you need the right people to help you and guide you through that. Yeah, there is no way that's going to happen, just with a local conveyancer to buy a piece of property. It doesn't work that way. Just as you and I would go to India, we need to know about the PAN card situation. We need to know about, who's going to look after it, who's going to manage it, who's going to do X, Y, and Z. Therefore, the simplest advice, do your due diligence and take on the right advisors. Somebody that will be there with you long term.
So
yes, I understand you.
Read the small print, as you
Absolutely.
say, and also take the right advice. The pitfalls you talk about, the advantages, is something that I just want to hear you talk about briefly as well, if you wouldn't mind.
Advantages in what way, Tony?
Investment in property in the UK.
Well, look, the major advantages are you're in a very secure area, frankly.
Yes.
From a legal and a geographically, politically based scenario, things can't go wrong, providing you cross the T's and dotted the I's. it's a great place. I've lived here now for almost 40 odd years, and I still go back to India, I go back to Africa. The reality is it's comfortable here. So the positivity here is that, more importantly for me, the community spirit, you just got to take this iGlobal initiative. What's that doing to not just the creating the bridge between India and here, but even internally? If you look at some of the stuff that I've been inviting me to do, such as the money show early this year, the wellness show, I think that there's a huge amount of emphasis around, let's create a community that works for us, with us, and by us. So I think the positivity there is, you're secure in terms of what you want to invest in, and you've got the assistance of the community, family and friends alongside you.
Fantastic. We'll take a short break and we'll come back just after this.
Thank you.
iEntertainment is brought to you by iGlobal for all the latest film and series reviews, starry interviews and cinema listings covering Bollywood and beyond to reflect a truly pan-Indian entertainment spectrum. Check out the latest at iGlobalnews.com.
So, Sanjay, that brings us to the end of our discussion today. And once again, a huge thank you to you. And once again, just to remind our listeners and viewers that Sanjay Rughani runs an organization called Sterling Professional Finance, and alongside Jayshree Rughani, and they are the founders of Sterling Professional Finance here in London. And today we spoke about the India-UK partnership and investment in London as well, where properties are concerned. And it certainly seems to be a very lucrative market. So, Sanjay, final words. And once again, a huge thank you to you for joining us here today. And as we head towards the festive season, wishing you and all at Sterling and your dear lady wife, Jay, wish her all the very best for Christmas as well.
Thank you, Tony, and I really appreciate being invited to have this conversation on the Living Bridge today. I will certainly pass your good wishes to Jay and the rest of the family, and equally, please pass on our good wishes to the iGlobal team, along with Ina and the rest of the team, as well as the family.
Thank you very much indeed. And so that brings us to the end of today's show. Remember, you can also play back any of the past sessions under the videos section of iGlobalnews.com or on our Facebook and YouTube channels. They are there for you. Please do use them. And for more Living Bridge conversations, stay tuned at iGlobalnews.com. And if you haven't already participated, do send in your entry for our ongoing essay and photography contest and get a chance to grab some exciting prizes. And we thank you for being with us here today. Thanks for listening and looking and viewing and being with us. You listen and watch us as well, and we will return the compliment to you. From me, Tony Patty, that's it for today. Bye-bye for now.